Hello everyone, my name is Olivia, and today I want to analyze the evolution of my reading style through the lens of past Goodreads challenges. I tweeted out, would it be cool to make a video going through my old Goodreads challenges to discuss the evolution of my reading taste and how I only just recently discovered what I truly like to read within the last 2 years, because that is pretty much accurate. I was looking through my different Goodreads challenges and I was looking at the different books that I read throughout the years, and I noticed how I was slowly but surely finding what I really liked in literature and the different books that actually became 5-star reads for me, because at the beginning of when I started Goodreads challenges, I was just reading so many different things that weren't actually my taste. So I kind of want to go through the different Goodreads challenges that I have taken part in, starting from 2015 all the way up to 2021, to kind of discuss how my reading taste has changed. And I feel like I've only found true favorite books of mine within the last 3 years. So let's start with my first Goodreads challenge that I took part in, which was in 2015. I read 108 books, and that was the most amount of books I have ever read in a year. That is the year that I graduated high school. I was deep into the heart of Tumblr. I was blogging on there. And what I noticed from my Goodreads challenge from 2015 is that I was picking up a lot of books that other people enjoyed and recommended on Tumblr, and I picked it up simply because that person liked it, therefore I should like it. I didn't really look into whether or not the book was my taste. I didn't really seem to have a reading taste in 2015. I was just kind of trying every single genre that people were recommending, and it was a very messy year. So I am starting at the beginning of 2015 in this Goodreads challenge. Here you can see that I am reading a lot of fantasy like Vampire Academy, Graceling. I believe this is the first year that I really delved deep into the romance genre. I tried it out a couple of years before, but I wasn't really heavy into it, so we can see a couple of hints of romance here and there along with a lot of fantasy, which we have discussed on my channel many times that I'm not that into. I'm not the biggest fan of fantasy, but in this year you can see that I'm trying out a lot of fantasy because so many other friends on Tumblr really enjoyed it, so I decided to try out the different series. I tried the Red Queen series, I tried The Coldest Girl in Cold Town, I tried Game of Thrones, I tried Grave Mercy, and those were just all books that were meh to me, because I did not know yet that I did not like fantasy. I don't know how I managed to read 108 books in 1 year, but apparently I had a better attention span than I do now in 2022, because I can never picture myself reading 108 books, but I also didn't have a lot of responsibilities in 2015. It was my last year of high school, so I wasn't doing a lot in school, so I was able to read a lot during study hall and during my classes, because those classes were kind of a joke within the last year of high school. Then I graduated high school, so I didn't have responsibilities during the summer. I was just kind of preparing for college. So I think that lended a lot of time for me to read all these books. I don't know, these books, when I look at them, I just would not recommend most of them because they did not leave a lasting impression on me because I was experimenting so much in 2015. Now let's move on to 2016, where I read 101 books. I was already 1 year into college, so I was getting used to that routine, and I was able to apparently read more than 100 books that year, which is impressive because I feel like I was very busy in the first year of college. So here you can see a lot of fantasy. I read You, which was really fun and I would recommend, but like these sci-fis, these fantasies, these thrillers, they're just not for me. I tried out the Foxhole Court series because everyone and their friends were raving about it on Tumblr. Was not for me at all. I tried out The Secret History. The same goes for The Secret History. I just was not enamored by it. I thought it was incredibly boring. You can also see a little bit of fantasy, but I feel like I'm getting out of the fantasy world because I was realizing that it just was not my cup of tea. I'm reading a lot of YA, but if I were to think back on these books, I just would not think of them as favorite books of mine because I was slowly but surely falling out of love with YA, but I still felt obligated to read it because I felt like I wasn't in the headspace to dive into adult fiction. So I was still reading a lot of YA because it was also the heart of the book community on Tumblr. And I was also technically a young adult. I think I was 18 at the time, or maybe 19, so I still related to YA, but I was also like reading it somewhat out of obligation just to be a part of the know, to be a part of the hype. Here you can see that I joined a Shakespeare class, so you can see it sprinkled throughout my reading challenge, and I really enjoyed that Shakespeare class that I took because we just got to analyze the text so well, and we got to write so many essays about it and discuss it in class, and that made me appreciate Shakespeare even more than I did so when I first read Shakespeare, because I've always loved Shakespeare, but taking that class was very formative in my love for Shakespeare. Looking back at this challenge and the books that I read throughout the year, there are only a couple that really stand out to me, and then all these other books are just forgettable to me because they did not become favorite books of mine, and I was reading them out of obligation, and I was reading them just to be a part of a crowd. I feel like you can see me slowly moving out of that throughout the years, but here I'm still in the thick of it. I'm still trying to be a part of all the hype. I took off my blazer because I was honestly sweating my butt off, and it was for like the academic aesthetic of this video, but honestly I feel like this does enough. So in 2017, I read 81 books, and I think this is because I was starting out in a new college because I went to community college and then I went to a 4-year college after the first 2 years. So I transitioned from community college to a 4-year college, and that was a big transition for me because the 4-year college was just very heavy in terms of workload. My major was very time consuming because I was a journalism major, so I was writing articles, I was interviewing people outside of class, I was editing those videos outside of class, and it just consumed all my time. So I was very busy during this year, but I still managed to read some pretty iconic books because when I think back on this year and I scroll through it, I'm just like, some of these books are just like A1. They're just so good. So let's get into that. So in this year, you can see that I'm reading a lot more romance, and this is probably in part because I started in this new college and I was very stressed out, and the way that I de-stress in terms of reading is reading romance. Romance books take my mind off of things, they're quick to read, they're not very long usually, and that is what I really clung on to in this year, and you can see that heavily throughout this Goodreads challenge. I was getting deeper into the romance community on Twitter, and I was following Cam and I was following Sil, who are two amazing romance book creators, and they just recommend amazing books. So I was taking their recommendations and reading these books and falling in love with them. But then you can also see I have some hints of fantasy, historical fiction. I kind of wove those in throughout the years to kind of break up the continuous romance reading that I was doing throughout this year. I found Haven by Rebecca Weatherspoon. I found The Girl with the Red Balloon. I found Wild Beauty. These are some of my favorite books that I recommend to so many people, and I read Lord of Shadows. I remember reading The Shadow of the Wind at my college and sitting at those windows and overlooking a forest, and it was just such a beautiful sight, and it was such a formative time in my reading life because that experience of reading The Shadow of the Wind when the whole building was empty, because I was like one of the first people there, was something that I'll always remember, and it just really stuck with my experience of reading Shadow of the Wind. So we have some pretty iconic books in 2017. I was delving deeper into what I love in books like historical fiction and romance and a hint of magical realism, because I might not like fantasy, but I do love magical realism. So 2017 was a pretty iconic year for me. So now let's move on to 2018. I don't want to show favoritism, but 2018 was one of my most iconic reading years. It was the year that I fell in love with reading. I was always in love with reading, but I was falling in love with almost all the books that I was picking up because I was finally finding my niche. I was finding the books that I was truly interested in. I wasn't reading for the hype. I wasn't reading for friends. I was reading for myself. I was getting recommendations from people I truly trusted. I was delving deeper into adult fiction, and this was my most iconic year in terms of reading, but I did only read 70 books this year. But you know what? It doesn't matter, because this year was the year of quality rather than quantity. At the beginning of the year, we already start out amazing with The Cruel Prince. The Cruel Prince was one of the only fantasy series that I really enjoyed. It was also YA, which was very surprising, but it was just everything I wanted and more from a fantasy. Enemies to lovers, intrigue, a ton of plot twists. It was just iconic. And then I read A Little Life. A Little Life is a book that I also distinctly remember reading in my college. It was one of the first books that made me outwardly sob. It was one of the first adult fiction books that I truly enjoyed, and it just really changed my life as a reader and opened up this new door like, hey, adult fiction's there for you. It's not too complex. It's not outside of like your comfort zone. You should delve deeper into it. So that's what I kind of got when I read A Little Life. So then I picked up The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. Having A Little Life and The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo being like 2 books apart is pretty detrimental to my mental health, but it was phenomenal. This is what's making this year so iconic, because I read The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo and I fell absolutely in love with that story. It opened my eyes to adult historical fiction and also reignited my love for old Hollywood. So we already have so many good books at the start of this year. Then we have If We Were Villains. This is the first dark academia novel that I truly enjoyed. This is the first book that kind of introduced me into the world of dark academia. I don't know who recommended If We Were Villains to me, but whoever did, thank you so much, because that is one of my favorite dark academia novels ever. Then we have In Cold Blood, which is one of my first nonfictions that I picked up voluntarily. After that, I find my favorite book of all time, Next Year in Havana. I don't have to talk about Next Year in Havana. I've spoken about it so many times. I found my favorite book of all time in 2018. That just shows you how the reading experience is so subjective, because people can find favorite books of all time when they're like 10 years old and always talk about it, but I didn't have a true favorite book of all time until I was 21, because I was still experimenting with reading. I was still trying to figure out which genre called to me. I was still trying to figure out which age range called to me. And I feel like this is the year where I started picking up books for me, and I didn't pick it up for others, and those were becoming favorite books of mine. And then I found Sheets, a book I randomly found at BookCon and greatly enjoyed. So it kind of introduced me into the world of graphic novels and how cute they can be and how entertaining they can be. I even read Dorian Gray throughout college voluntarily. I decided to pick it up because I saw so many people quote it on Tumblr and on Instagram, and I thought, this book sounds really good. Why don't I just read it outside of a classroom setting? And I really enjoyed it, and it's one of my new favorite classic novels of all time. And you can also see that I'm getting into audiobooks. I started out my first audiobook with Warcross. This is a YA novel that a lot of people were raving about, so I decided to listen to it, and I fell in love with the story and the narrator and just the way that audiobooks feel when I'm listening to them. So you can see the gradual shift from just reading physical books to also listening to audiobooks. So those are going to be sprinkled out throughout the rest of the years, because this is the year that was not only finding new favorite books of mine, but I was also discovering a new mode of reading, which was really cool. So I do have to say 2018 is probably my most iconic year in terms of reading. It's just the year that I found so many good books, and it became such a formative year for me in the world of reading. In 2019, I read 101 books, and this is also another iconic year for me. This year, I was delving into adult fiction a little bit more. Here you can see that I'm getting a little bit deeper into graphic novels, and as we get later into the year, we can see that I'm picking up new favorite books of mine, like The Dreamers by Karen Thompson Walker. Such a phenomenal book, such a weird book that I would have never picked up years before, but I decided to pick up because it sounded like it was my cup of tea, and it ended up being a really good book despite the fact that so many people were giving it low ratings. So that's a piece of improvement that I'm making throughout the years, that I'm letting go of the hype and I'm kind of just reading for myself, and I don't care about reviews and I don't care about what other friends think of books, because what they might not like, I might really enjoy. Then I picked up Mindhunter, amazing. I picked up Security, fantastic. The Starless Sea. You can just see that I'm enjoying more of the books that I'm picking up, and they are leaving lasting impressions on me. This was such an iconic reading year. My reading was invigorated because of BookCon, so that's how I feel like I was able to read a lot of books throughout this year, because BookCon really ignited my love for literature and it reignited my love for reading, and I was just in such a big reading mood in 2019. So now let's move on to 2020. As you can tell, Something happened in 2020 that kind of affected my reading mood. This is the year that I really dove into adult fiction and kind of let go of YA because it just was not something that I was interested in anymore. I was way older than the characters. I just was not relating to them anymore, and I was giving them all 3 stars, and I didn't want to have 3-star reads constantly when I was reading some 5-star read adult fiction novels. So this is the year that I dove headfirst into adult fiction. I also was getting deeper into translated fiction, like Before the Coffee Gets Cold. That was one of my first translated reads, and it was a new favorite book of mine, and it's also a book that I continually recommend. This is just an iconic year because I can remember all these different reading experiences. I remember reading Queenie and listening to that story. I remember sitting down and reading Angel's Game so quickly. I remember reading Zenny. I remember listening to the Traveling Cat Chronicles. These are just such formative reading experiences, and they happened within the last couple of years. I had a lot of fun with it. I had a lot of fun with the stories that I read, despite the fact that this was a very slow reading year because I just did not have the attention span to sit down and escape into fiction. I just was continuously scrolling, reading the news, being anxious, but I still managed to read a lot of amazing books. Like, oh my god, this section, whenever I look at it, I get so happy because these are some of my favorite reads that I really enjoyed. Like, we have The Forest of Wool and Steel, Moon of the Crusted Snow, The Bass Rock, Hamnet, and Transcendent Kingdom. I read 5 amazing books back to back to back to back to back. 2020 was just a great reading year for me in terms of finding new favorite books of mine. I read 100 books in 2020. I don't remember pulling that off, but maybe I did. I guess I did read 100 books in 2020. Obviously, it's here on the list. It just feels like I read maybe like 80 or maybe 90 books, but I read 100 books in 2020. Wow. Look at me. Wished I was me now. So in the beginning of 2021, we start out with 4 amazing reads that I would have never picked up in like 2015 or 16. And it is Little Women, a classic that I read voluntarily, The Vanishing Half, an adult fiction that would have intimidated me back then, Hood Feminism, a nonfiction, and Mindhunter, another nonfiction. So you can see how I broadened my horizons from 2015 to 2021 because I'm reading things that I would have never picked up as a teenager. But now that I'm an adult, and now that I've broadened my horizons and I figured out what I like, I'm reaching out towards things that I would have never thought I would have loved, but now I greatly enjoy. I was reading things that not a lot of people were reading, like The Lamplighters and The Lake of Dead Languages. Those are 2 books that I found on Book Talk that were underrated reads that I decided to pick up, despite the fact that nobody else I knew had read those books, and I really enjoyed them. A book that I did listen to the hype with, that I greatly enjoyed, The Love Hypothesis. This is the first time in a while that I listened to the hype and fell absolutely in love with the book. The Love Hypothesis just reignited my love for mainstream romance rather than just reading indie romance, and I just fell absolutely in love with it, and I'm really glad that I listened to the hype. And that is a book that I got a recommendation from on Book Talk. But in 2021, I feel like I was reading a lot for me, and I wasn't letting other people influence me, and I was just reading purely for the enjoyment of it all. But I do have to admit that in 2021, I did not find as many favorite books as I did in previous years. I don't know what it was about 2021 that made me so unlucky, and I don't think it's because I was picking up the wrong books, because I was picking up books that I was genuinely interested in, that nobody else was kind of influencing me to read, but I think I just had bad luck in this year, and I'm hoping that in 2022 I read a lot more 5-star reads like I did in like 2018 and 2019. So I hope you enjoyed watching me kind of go through my Goodreads challenges and analyze how my reading has changed from 2015 all the way to 2021. I graduated high school, I graduated college, I moved from YA to adult fiction, I moved from reading just physically to reading digitally, physically, and audibly, but I thought it was interesting to go through the years of my Goodreads challenges and kind of see the fluctuations of how many books I read, what types of books I was reading, and what format of books I was reading them in. Now I listen to a lot of audiobooks. In the beginning, I only really read YA, and I was reading a lot of fantasy and a lot of sci-fi in order to be in the know with my friends in the book community. But now I'm picking up books that are pretty unknown. I'm picking up books that interest me only, and even if my friends give them a low star rating, I'm still going to pick up the book because it might become a new favorite book of mine. So I feel like I've really matured in terms of my reading taste, and let me know how your reading taste has evolved throughout the years. Are there certain genres that you read as a young reader that you don't read now? Are there different ways that you read now? And let me know how your reading taste has changed, because I will love to discuss down below. If you want to follow me anywhere else on social media, all my social media links will be down below. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you in another one. Bye!